What if you could get a metal-bodied phone with a 6.83-inch 144Hz AMOLED display bright enough to blind you in direct sunlight, a periscope zoom that goes all the way to 140 times, and a light-up Glyph Matrix on the back that still turns heads in 2026, all without spending flagship money? That's exactly what nothing is betting on with the Phone 4a Pro. And honestly, after spending time with this thing, I think it might be the most interesting mid-range phone of the year. The question is whether it's actually better than just buying a flagship. Stick around, we're going to find out. Welcome back to X-Zone. If you're new here, we do in-depth smartphone reviews, gaming tests, and camera comparisons, all aimed at helping you figure out what's actually worth your money. Let's get into it. Before we dive deep, here's the quick version. The Nothing Phone 4a Pro runs on a Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 chip. That's a 4nm processor, paired with up to 12 gigs of super-fast LPDDR5X RAM and up to 256 gigs of storage. The display is a massive 6.83-inch 1.5K AMOLED that hits a wild 5000 nits peak brightness. On the back, you've got 3 cameras, a 50-megapixel Sony main sensor with optical image stabilization, a 50-megapixel periscope telephoto at 3.5 times optical zoom, and an 8-megapixel ultra-wide. The battery sits at 5080 mAh, 5400 in some regions, charging at 50 watts. It runs Android 16 with Nothing OS 4.1 out of the box, and it comes in black, silver, or pink, all wrapped in an aluminum unibody shell rated IP65 for dust and water resistance. That's the snapshot. Now let's actually talk about this phone. Let's start where Nothing always starts strong: design. Previous Nothing phones had that signature transparent plastic back with visible internals. Love it or hate it, it was distinctive. The 4a Pro takes a different direction. This is a full aluminium unibody, and the moment you pick it up, you feel the difference. It's about 7.9mm thin and weighs around 210 grams. Not the lightest phone in this class, but it's solid without feeling like a brick. In the hand, it feels genuinely premium. The machined edges, the matte finish on the back, the way the curves flow into the frame. This is a phone that doesn't look like it costs what it actually costs. The pink colorway is especially striking on camera. It's subtle but eye-catching, which I think is exactly the kind of design risk that Nothing pulls off well. Ergonomically, 210 grams over a long gaming session does become noticeable, and that 6.83-inch screen means one-handed use is pretty much off the table for most people. But if you're watching content, playing games, or just scrolling, it's comfortable. The IP65 rating is worth calling out practically. This means the phone can handle a splash of rain, a spilled drink, or dusty environments. It is not a swimming phone. Don't drop it in the pool. But for everyday life, IP65 is genuinely reassuring. And then there's the Glyph Matrix, the grid of lights on the back that Nothing has made bigger and more expressive here. You can assign different glyph animations to different contacts, use it as a countdown timer you can see face down on the table, watch it pulse during charging, or just let it light up with the beat of your music. Is it useful? Sort of. Is it a conversation starter every single time? Absolutely. Whether that matters to you says a lot about whether this phone is your vibe. The display on this phone is one of its clearest strengths, and I want to make sure that point actually lands. A 6.83-inch 1.5K AMOLED with a 144Hz adaptive refresh rate and 5000 nits peak brightness is, objectively, a class-leading screen for this price bracket. In direct sunlight, and I mean standing outside on a bright afternoon, this display stays readable when a lot of competitors wash out. That 5000 nit peak is one of the highest you'll find outside of flagship territory. Under normal indoor conditions, colors are punchy and accurate, blacks are true blacks the way only OLED can deliver, and the 10-bit color depth means HDR content on YouTube or Netflix looks genuinely great. The 144Hz adaptive refresh makes scrolling feel silky. If you've ever used a phone that refreshes at 60Hz and then switched to a high refresh panel, you'll know exactly what I mean. Going back always feels wrong. At 144 Hz, everything just flows. Speakers, and this one actually, deliver a solid stereo experience. There's decent width and separation, the highs are crisp, and while you're not going to confuse these with a Bluetooth speaker, they hold up for watching content without headphones. Gaming audio especially benefits from the stereo separation. It's not the best speakers in this price range, but it's competitive. The Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 is the chip doing the heavy lifting here, and for daily use, it's genuinely excellent. Apps open fast, multitasking between several apps at once doesn't cause hesitation, animations are smooth, and nothing in my standard daily workflow, messaging, browsing, social media, YouTube, ever felt sluggish. For gaming, the picture is a bit more nuanced. Is this a benchmark monster? No. But for most games most people actually play, it gets the job done well. Thermals are genuinely improved over previous Nothing phones. They've redesigned the cooling chamber, and in my testing, even after 30 to 40 minutes of gaming, the phone gets warm but never uncomfortably hot, and it doesn't throttle noticeably. That's important for long sessions. To be fair, if you're someone who demands maximum frame rates in every game at every setting, the Snapdragon 8 Elite in flagships is in another league. The 7 Gen 4 is flagship level for most people, and I say that without irony, because most people aren't pushing their phone to its absolute limit. Nothing OS 4.1 on Android 16 is one of the cleanest Android experiences you can get right now. The UI is minimal without feeling bare, the fonts and icon system are consistent and distinctive, very Nothing, and there is almost no bloatware to speak of. If you're coming from a phone loaded with manufacturer apps you never use, the first boot of Nothing OS feels like a breath of fresh air. The update commitment is solid. Nothing is promising 3 major Android version upgrades from Android 16, which means this phone should theoretically reach Android 19. That's important if you plan to hold onto a phone for 2 or 3 years, which most people outside of flagship territory do. On the AI features front, Nothing is taking a lighter touch than some competitors. There's useful camera processing happening under the hood, and you get some smart suggestions in the OS, but Nothing isn't throwing an AI assistant at you every 5 seconds. Personally, I think that's the right call for 2026. Let the tools be useful without being intrusive. If you own Nothing earbuds, the integration is seamless. Automatic pairing, battery display in the notification shade, quick settings for audio modes. And if you're interested in the new Headphone A that Nothing released alongside this phone, the experience is equally smooth. Camera time. And this is where the conversation gets interesting. The main 50-megapixel Sony LYT700C sensor with OIS is a genuinely capable shooter. In daylight, you get sharp, detailed photos with accurate colors and solid dynamic range. Skin tones are handled well, not overly processed, not washed out. At night, the camera does well in moderately low light, though in very dark environments you will see noise creeping in and some loss of fine detail. It's a strong performer, but to be direct with you, it still sits a tier below what Google's Pixel lineup does in computational photography. If camera consistency is your top priority, the Pixel is still the benchmark. The periscope telephoto is the flashiest spec on paper, and at 3.5 times optical, it's actually very useful day to day. You get clean, detailed shots at that zoom level, and shots at 5 times to 10 times hold up reasonably well. Once you push into the extreme territory, 50 times, 100 times, 140 times, you're firmly in interesting novelty territory. The photos become soft and noisy, and you'd really only use them to see something far away in the moment, not for an image you'd actually share. Fun? Yes. Practical beyond 15 times or so? Not really. The ultra-wide is the weakest of the 3. Serviceable and fine for wide shots and group photos, but it's clearly a step down in sharpness and low-light performance compared to the main sensor. The 32-megapixel selfie camera is a highlight. Selfies are sharp and detailed with good skin tone rendering, and the 4K 30 front camera video is genuinely impressive for a phone in this bracket. On the video side, overall, 4K at 30 frames per second looks clean with good stabilization. The lack of 4K 60 is a gap worth noting if you shoot a lot of video. Slow motion works, but only at lower resolutions. Low-light video is decent, not exceptional. If you're a serious content creator, you'll notice the ceiling. If you're shooting memories, it's more than enough. Practical bottom line. For most people, taking photos of food, friends, travel, and everyday life, this camera system is very good. If you're choosing between this and a Pixel for camera reasons specifically, lean Pixel. For everything else this phone offers, you might make a different call. Battery life is one of the places this phone actually surprises you. The 5080 mAh cell, 5400 in some regions, combined with the efficiency of the Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 means this phone lasts. Nothing themselves claim around 21 hours of continuous YouTube streaming and nearly 25 hours of social media scrolling, which are, predictably, optimistic lab numbers. In real mixed usage, some social media, messaging, a little camera use, some gaming, and YouTube, I'd realistically estimate you're looking at a full day with meaningful battery to spare for most users. Heavy users will hit their limit in the evening, but they'll get there. Charging at 50 watts means you can go from near empty to around 50% in roughly 30 minutes, and a full charge takes just under an hour with a compatible charger. That's not the fastest in this price bracket, but it's comfortably fast enough. The one sacrifice worth calling out, there is no wireless charging. For some people, that's a deal breaker, especially if you've been using Qi charging and don't want to go back to cables. It's a real trade-off, and for a phone at this price, it's worth knowing up front. Pricing. In the US, the Nothing Phone 4a Pro starts at $499 for the 8GB 128GB model and $569 for the 12GB 256GB variant. That puts this firmly in the upper mid-range or budget flagship category, well below what you'd pay for a Samsung Galaxy S series or iPhone, but priced to compete seriously with the best in class at this tier. Street prices will shift over time. There are promos, carrier deals, and seasonal sales, so always check Nothing's website or major retailers like Amazon and Best Buy for the most current price before you buy. At around $500, you're competing with the Google Pixel 10a, Samsung's Galaxy A series, and various OnePlus and Nord devices. And I'll say this clearly, the Nothing Phone 4a Pro is a very compelling option in this bracket, especially if you weight design and display heavily. Whether it beats those competitors on paper depends on what matters most to you. Here's my verdict. The Nothing Phone 4a Pro is the best argument Nothing has ever made for choosing their ecosystem over the mainstream options. It doesn't beat flagships at everything. It was never trying to. But for the money, it gives you more premium feeling than almost anything else at this price. And for most people, that trade-off lands in its favor. I want to know what you think. Would you pick this over a Pixel 10a, a Galaxy A series phone, or an iPhone SE style device in your region? If you found this review helpful, a like takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think. Subscribe for more honest smartphone reviews, and I'll see you in the next one.